Good morning and welcome to Bible study for Wednesday, April 7th. Today we begin looking at the Book of Deuteronomy. Now, Deuteronomy is considered the last book of the Pentateuch, or the first 5 books of the Bible, or the first 5 books of the Hebrew Scriptures. All of which are said to be authored by Moses or to be heavily influenced by Moses and compiled by Moses by the various authors and works of the time. So Deuteronomy, we know, is mostly in Moses's voice, meaning he is the main speaker, but there had to have been at least some other speakers / people doing the recording, because Deuteronomy ends with Moses's death and the entrance of the people into the promised land. And so that part had to have clearly been authored or recorded by a follower of Moses. But as we enter into Deuteronomy, it's important to realize we've just had a census in Numbers, and we've just had this articulation of how entering into the promised land is going to go, with re-evaluating and renewing the covenant with God's people. And now Deuteronomy is the final message given by Moses to the people. So this is sort of his final sermon or collection of sermons, offering both encouragement and challenge. And there's also a lot of recovering what happened in Numbers, but rather than just historical account, it also adds a theological lens, meaning Moses is making some value statements and some evaluations of what happened, what was good, what was bad, and what might need to change for the people to succeed and do well in the promised land. So as we go through Deuteronomy, again, it's going to seem very familiar if you've been coming to Bible study regularly and as we've gone through the Pentateuch. But there are some really good nuggets of wisdom in here. So chapter 1 is the first address, meaning this is the speech that Moses is giving the gathered people. These are the words that Moses spoke to all the people of Israel while they were in the wilderness east of the Jordan River. They were camped in the Jordan Valley near Suf, between Paran on one side and Tophel, Laban, Hazeroth, and Dizahab on the other. Normally it takes only 11 days to travel from Mount Sinai to Kadesh Barnea, going by way of Mount Seir. But 40 years after the Israelites left Egypt, on the first day of the 11th month, Moses addressed the people of Israel, telling them everything the Lord had commanded him to say. This took place after he had defeated King Sihon of the Amorites, who ruled in Heshbon, and at Edrei had defeated King Og of Bashan, who ruled in Ashtaroth. While the Israelites were in the land of Moab, east of the Jordan River, Moses carefully explained the Lord's instructions as followed. When we were at Mount Sinai, the Lord our God said to us, "You have stayed on this mountain long enough. It is time to break camp and move on. Go to the hill country of the Amorites, to all the neighboring regions, the Jordan Valley, the hill country, the western foothills, the Negev, and the coastal plain. Go to the land of the Canaanites and to Lebanon and all the way to the great Euphrates River. Look, I am giving you all this land to you. Go in and occupy it, for this is the land the Lord swore to give to your ancestors, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and to all their descendants." So Moses is again reiterating this theological claim to the land, because when Abraham was told to journey west, this is the land he was told to go into and occupy, and then the promise was given to Abraham that his descendants would inherit and live long in the land. So this is seen as the continuation of the promise. Now Moses appoints leaders for each tribe. Verse 9. Moses continued, "At the time I told you, you were too great a burden for me to carry all by myself." Remember back back when Moses was hanging out in the wilderness and he was taking care of all of the complaints of the people of Israel, and he would stay from day to night hearing the words of the law, and his father-in-law comes to him and goes, this is going to wear you out. It's not good for you. It's not good for the people. Moses, again, reiterates before he leaves the importance of delegation. The Lord your God has increased your population, making you as numerous as the stars. And may the Lord, the God of your ancestors, multiply you 1,000 times more and bless you as he promised. But you are such a heavy load to carry. How can I deal with all your problems and bickering? Choose some well-respected men from each tribe who are known for their wisdom and understanding, and I will appoint them as your leaders. There's a tendency in church culture to centralize around the priest or the leader, and to try and run everything through them. And that is exhausting. And it is not feasible, especially for a church to grow and to flourish. And for God's people to grow and flourish, people need to be raised up and equipped to be leaders over their sections and their ministries and their people and their places. And so Moses is reiterating this wisdom. Verse 14, then you responded, your plan is a good one. So I took the wise and respected men you had selected from your tribes and appointed them to serve as judges and officials over you. Some were responsible for 1,000 people, some for 100, some for 50, and some for 10. At that time, I instructed the judges, you must hear the cases of your fellow Israelites and the foreigners living among you. Be perfectly fair in your decisions and impartial in your judgments. Hear the cases of those who are poor as well as those who are rich. Don't be afraid of anyone's anger, for the decision you make is God's decision. Bring me any cases that are too difficult for you, and I will handle them. At that time, I gave you instruction about everything you were to do. And then, just as the Lord our God commanded us, we left Mount Sinai and traveled through the great and terrifying wilderness, as you yourselves remember, and headed toward the hill country of the Amorites. When we arrived at Kadesh Barnea, I said to you, you've now reached the hill country of the Amorites that the Lord our God is giving us. Look, he has placed the land in front of you. Go and occupy it as the Lord, the God of your ancestors, has promised you. Do not be afraid. Don't be discouraged. But you all came back to me and said, first, let's send out scouts to explore the land for us. They will advise you on the best route to take, which towns we should enter. This seemed like a good idea to me. And I have this little portion underlined as Moses is now expressing regret. Moses is, with hindsight, reflecting and saying, it seemed like a good idea at the time. So I chose 12 scouts, one from each of your tribes, and they headed for the hill country and came to the valley of Eshcol and explored it. They picked some of its fruit and brought it back to us, and they reported, the land the Lord our God has given us is indeed a good land. So this actual meaning of Deuteronomy is that it is a second law. Not that God's law has changed, but it's being issued a second time for a second generation. This is Moses's passionate sermon to this new generation. Here's all of the ways we screwed it up last time. Don't do that. Learn from our mistakes. It's a sermon to help prepare the Israelites to enter and transition power. So Moses, being a good leader, talks about what went wrong. Verse 26, but you rebelled against the command of the Lord your God and refused to go in. You complained in your tents and said, the Lord must hate us. That's why he's brought us here from Egypt, to hand us over to the Amorites to be slaughtered. Where can we go? Our brothers have demoralized us with their report. They tell us the people of the land are taller and more powerful than we are, and their towns are large with walls rising high into the sky. We even saw giants there, the descendants of Anak. But I said to you, don't be shocked or afraid of them. The Lord your God is going ahead of you. He will fight for you just as you saw him do in Egypt. And you saw how the Lord your God cared for all along the way as you traveled through the wilderness. Just as a father cares for his child, now he has brought you to this place. And here we have another theological addition where he says, Moses writes, "But even after all he did, you refused to trust the Lord your God, who goes before you looking for the best places to camp, guiding you with a pillar of fire by night and a pillar of cloud by day." Moses is saying, look, you had every reason to trust in the Lord, but you didn't. So verse 34, when the Lord heard your complaining, he became very angry. So he solemnly swore, not one of you from this wicked generation will live to see the good land I swore to your ancestors, except Caleb, son of Jephunneh. He will see this land because he has followed the Lord completely. I will give him and his descendants some of the very land he explored during his scouting mission. Verse 37 is where I look at Moses's authorship and I go, huh. And the Lord was also angry with me because of you. He said to me, Moses, not even you will enter the promised land. That's not exactly how it happened, if you recall, back in when they are journeying through the wilderness in Exodus and Numbers. Moses receives a complaint of the people. Yet again, they need water. Yet again, they're thirsty. And yet again, they're saying, God's brought us out here to die. And Moses goes and intercedes on behalf of the people, and he prays for water. And God says, okay, go to the rock, lift up your staff, and command water to come out of the rock. But Moses goes, lifts up his staff, looks at the people, gets angry, yells at them a little bit, and says, do I have to do everything for you people? And he bangs the rock with his staff. God, in God's faithfulness, still allows and makes water to appear, but God says, look, you didn't do as I asked. You still didn't trust in me, and you added to the directions that I gave you. So now you're not going to go into the promised land either. This is why this verse here, this is why I trust that Moses really wrote most of this, because he makes a dodge and a sidestep of who's to blame. Because human beings do that. We don't like to own our own mistakes fully, and it's very easy to blame others for making us do things, particularly as children are wont to do. So Moses blames the people for his mistake. Verse 38, instead your assistant, Joshua son of Nun, will lead the people into the land. Encourage him, for he will lead Israel as they take possession of it. I will give the land to your little ones, your innocent children. You were afraid they would be captured, but they will be the ones who will occupy it. As for you, turn around now and go on back through the wilderness towards the Red Sea. Then you confessed, we have sinned against the Lord. We will go into the land and fight for it, as the Lord our God has commanded us. So your men strapped on their weapons, thinking it would be easy to attack the hill country. But the Lord told me to tell you, do not attack, for I am not with you. If you go ahead on your own, you will be crushed by your enemies. This is what I told you, but you would not listen. Instead, you again rebelled against the Lord's command and arrogantly went into the hill country to fight. But the Amorites who lived there came out against you like a swarm of bees. They chased and battered you all the way from Seir to Hormah. Then you returned and wept before the Lord, but he refused to listen. So you stayed there at Kadesh for a long time. So we've now heard Moses' account of the rebellion, the failure to go in, and now he's going to summarize the wanderings of a second time through the desert or wilderness, chapter 2. Then we turned around and headed back across the wilderness toward the Red Sea, just as the Lord had instructed me, and we wandered around in the region of Mount Seir for a long time. Then at last the Lord said to me, you've been wandering around in the hill country long enough. Turn, go to the north. Give these orders to the people. You will pass through the country belonging to your relatives, the Edomites, the descendants of Esau, who live in Seir. The Edomites will feel threatened, so be careful. Do not bother them, for I have given them all the hill country around Mount Seir as their property, and I will not give you even 1 square foot of their land. If you need food to eat or to drink, pay them for it. For the Lord your God has blessed you in everything you have done. He has watched your every step through this great wilderness. During these 40 years, the Lord your God has been with you, and you've lacked for nothing. So we passed by the territory of our relatives, the descendants of Esau, who lived in Seir. We avoided the road through the Arabah Valley that comes from Elath and Ezion-Geber. Then, as we turned north along the desert route through Moab, the Lord warned us, do not bother the Moabites, the descendants of Lot, or start a war with them. I have given them Ar as their property. I will not give you any of their land. A race of giants called the Emites once lived in the area of Ar. They were as strong and numerous and as tall as the Anakites, another race of giants. Both the Emites and the Anakites are also known as Rephites, though the Moabites call them Emites. In earlier times, the Horites lived in Seir, but they were driven out and displaced by the descendants of Esau, just as Israel drove out the people of Canaan when the Lord gave Israel their land. So let's pause just briefly here and talk about giants in the Bible. We're not talking about James and the giant or Jack and the beanstalk giant. We are talking about very tall people. Many modern persons would be considered giants by this biblical standard. Remember, men are about 9 inches shorter back in these days, on average, and women generally would have been maybe a foot shorter. So historically, people have gotten taller and taller as access to adequate nutrition and health over a prolonged period of time is available. And so in this region, there are people considered to be classes of giants. But what has really happened is that these people historically have lived in fertile valleys and areas, particularly the Euphrates-Tigris area, is very fertile, lots of good food to eat. Over time, those people have grown taller and taller as their ancestors have had continuous access to adequate nutrition. They're not 9, 10, 12 feet tall. They might have been 6 feet tall, which would have been a giant. I mean, I'm 5'6", 5'7", and when I meet a woman who's 6'3", 6'4", I go, whoa, you're very tall. If I was 4'9" and meeting a 6 foot tall person, I would definitely be intimidated, even more so. So yes, this is what we're talking about when we come to these giant peoples. These are people who historically were much, much taller than the average Israelite or the average person of the day, but not freakishly, abnormally so. It was just really good nutrition. Yay. All right, so we've come through the giants and we're in verse 13. Moses continued. Then the Lord said to us, get moving, cross the Zered brook. So we crossed the brook. 38 years passed from the first time we left Kadesh Barnea until they finally crossed the Zered brook. By then, all the men old enough to fight in battle had died in the wilderness, as the Lord vowed would happen. The Lord struck them down until they had all been eliminated from the community. When all the men of fighting age had died, the Lord said to me, Today you will cross the border at Moab at Ar and enter the land of the Ammonites, the descendants of Lot. But do not bother them or start a war with them. I have given the land of Ammon to them as their property, and I will not give you any of their land. So the Israelites are instructed, this isn't your place. This is the place reserved for Lot. I think it's really important for us as Christians, coming in a time in history where we have gone through crusades, where we have gone through the Spanish Inquisition, where we have gone through historical times of believing we had a divine right to land and to places based on having the right faith or the right God, to really look at this portion of Scripture. Because did Lot follow God perfectly? No. Lot is described as having his wife turn into a pillar of salt and having incest with his daughters in the mountains when his daughters believed that they would have no children or marriage after the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah. But yet, here we have the descendants of Lot being guaranteed that their land is theirs. And we also had Moabites and Edomites and Esau. Esau gave away his birthright. And yet, that is their land. God makes covenants with people. Our covenant with God does not supersede God's covenant with another group that may be based on different heritage, different history, and different ways of even worshiping God. And yet, still valid and good. So I think it's important for us to remember these things as we look at continuing in a world in which population is expanding and available property is diminishing, to honor First Peoples, First Nations, and people's claims to how they got here. So yes, God honors and values who was already there many times. So verse 20, that area was once considered the land of Rephaites, who had lived there through the Ammonites and called themselves Zamzummites. They were also as strong and numerous and as tall as the Anakites, but the Lord destroyed them so Ammonites could occupy their land. He had done the same for the descendants of Esau who lived in Seir, for he destroyed the Horites so they could settle in their place. The descendants of Esau live there to this day. A similar thing happened when the Kepharites came from Crete, invaded and destroyed the Avites who had lived in villages in the area of Gaza. Moses continued, Then the Lord said, Now get moving, cross the Arnon Gorge. Look, I will hand you over to you Sihon the Amorite, the king of Heshbon, and I will give you his land. Attack him and begin to occupy the land, beginning today, and I will make people throughout the earth terrified because of you. When they hear reports about you, they will tremble with dread and fear. Moses continued, From the wilderness of Kedemoth I sent as ambassadors to King Sihon of Heshbon with this proposal of peace. Let us travel through your land. We will stay on the main road and won't turn off into the fields on either side. Sell us food to eat and water to drink, and we will pay for it. All we want is permission to pass through your land. The descendants of Esau who lived in Seir allowed us to go through their country. So did the Moabites who lived in Ar. Let us pass through until we see the Jordan, unto the land the Lord our God is giving us. But King Sihon of Heshbon refused to allow the Israelites to pass through. Because the Lord your God made Sihon stubborn and defiant, so he could help you defeat him, as he has now done. So, again, God has given them the ability to go through places safely, and yet this particular group of people is not willing to allow them to come through. King Sihon says, nope, I'm not letting you come. I don't trust you. So God allows them to have what I have called in my notes a practice battle, meaning this is a time of practice and preparation for what's going to happen in the future. So the Lord says, verse 31, look, I've begun to hand King Sihon and his land over to you. Begin now to conquer and occupy his land. Then King Sihon declared war on us and mobilized his forces at Jahaz, but the Lord our God handed him over to us, and we crushed him, his sons, and all his people. We conquered all his towns and completely destroyed everyone, men, women, and children. Not a single person was spared. We took all the livestock as plunder for ourselves, along with anything of value from the towns we ransacked. The Lord our God has also helped us conquer Araror on the edge of the Arnon Gorge and the town in the gorge and the whole area as far as Gilead. No town had walls too strong for us. However, we avoided the land of the Ammonites all along the Jabbok River and the towns in the hill country, all the places our Lord God had commanded us to leave alone. So Moses is retelling a story about a battle in which the Israelites did well. They conquered. And this is going to continue. And we kind of read through it and we go, yeah. Why are we talking about this? Remember, this is a pep talk. This is a sermon given to the people who are going to face people their relatives refused and were afraid to go see. So Moses is saying, look, we've done this before. I would argue that the way Moses talks about these battles is similar to the ways in which we in our country, in America, talk about the Revolutionary War. We talk about ourselves as this scrabbly people, this people who didn't have troops in fancy uniforms, and we didn't have well battalioned and supplied soldiers, and yet by our sheer tenacity and cunningness, we were able to fight back the intruding British army. Moses is speaking similarly. He's giving the people pep talk as well as amping them up and helping them to realize and celebrate the little victories in hopes of more. So next we move on to chapter 3 to talk about Og and Bashan. Next, we turned and headed for the land of Bashan, where King Og and his entire army attacked us at Edrei. But the Lord told me, do not be afraid of him, for I have given you victory over Og and his entire army, and I will give you all his land. Treat him as you treated King Sihon of the Amorites, who ruled in Heshbon. So the Lord our God handed King Og and all his people over to us, and we killed them all. Not a single person survived. We conquered all 60 of his towns, the entire Argob region in the kingdom of Bashan. Not a single town escaped our conquest. These towns were all fortified with high walls and barred gates. We also took many unwalled villages at the same time. We completely destroyed the kingdom of Bashan, just as we had destroyed King Sihon of Heshbon. We destroyed all the people in every town we conquered, men, women, and children alike. But we kept all the livestock for ourselves and took plunder from all the towns. Again, Moses is bragging and saying, look at what we've already accomplished and what we are capable of. So we took the land of the 2 Amorite kings east of the Jordan River, all the way from the Arnon Gorge to the Mount Hermon. Mount Hermon is called Surion by the Sidonians, and the Amorites call it Senir. We have now conquered all the cities on the plateau and all Gilead and Bashan, as far as the towns of Selecah and Edrei, which were part of Og's kingdom in Bashan. King Og of Bashan was the last survivor of the giant Rephites. His bed was made of iron and was more than 13 feet long and 6 feet wide. It can still be seen in the Ammonite city of Rabbah. Okay, so again, we're talking about giants. Look, we've defeated a giant before, this King Og. Notice Moses doesn't talk about how big he was. He talks about how big his bed was. Presumably, King Og was not 13 feet tall, but he liked having a very tall bed. Again, we don't know exactly how tall he was. We don't have an archaeological record. I would guess somewhere in the 6-foot range, maybe 7 feet, just like we have the occasional 7-foot basketball player. But again, he had a very big bed. It's very impressive. Verse 12. When we took possession of this land, I gave to the tribes of Reuben and Gad the territory beyond Ararat along the Arnon Gorge, plus half of the hill country of Gilead with its towns. Then I gave the rest of Gilead and all of Bashan, Og's former kingdom, to the half-tribe of Manasseh. This entire Argob region of Bashan used to be known as the land of the Reaphites. Jair, from the tribe of Manasseh, conquered the whole Argob region in Bashan, all the way to the border of the Geshurites and the Maacathites. Jair renamed this region after himself, calling it the towns of Jair, as it is still known today. I gave Gilead to the clan of Machir, but I also gave part of Gilead to the tribes of Reuben and Gad. The area I gave them extended from the middle of the Arnon Gorge in the south to the Jabbok River on the Ammonite frontier. They also received the Jordan Valley all the way from the Sea of Galilee down to the Dead Sea, with the Jordan River serving as the western boundary. To the east were the slopes of Pisgah. So now Moses is going to invite the people to remember their promises. At the time I gave this command to the tribes that would live east of the Jordan, although the Lord your God has given you this land as your property, all your fighting men must cross the Jordan ahead of your Israelite relatives, armed and ready to assist them. Your wives, children, and numerous livestock, however, may stay behind in the towns I have given you. When the Lord has given security to the rest of the Israelites, as he has to you, and when they occupy the land of the Lord your God is giving them across the Jordan River, then you may all return here to the land I have given you. Moses is trying to commend to them to be unified, to say, look, we helped you get your land. You're going to help us get ours. We need each other. Verse 21. At that time, I gave Joshua this charge. You have seen for yourself everything the Lord your God has done to these two kings. He will do the same to all the kingdoms on the west side of the Jordan. Do not be afraid of the nations there, for the Lord your God will fight for you. At that time, I pleaded with the Lord and said, O sovereign Lord, you have only begun to show your greatness and the strength of your hand to me, your servant. Is there any God in heaven or on earth who can perform such great and mighty deeds as you do? Please let me cross the Jordan to see the wonderful land on the other side, the beautiful hill country, and the Lebanon mountains. But the Lord was angry with me because of you, and he would not listen to me. That's enough, he declared. Speak of it no more. But go out, look to Pisgah Peak, and look over the land in every direction. Take a good look. But you may not cross the Jordan River. Instead, commission Joshua and encourage and strengthen him, for he will lead the people across the Jordan. He will give them all the land you now see before you as their possession. So he stayed in the valley near Beth Peor. So again, Moses pleads to God, please, pretty, please. I didn't mean it. But God says no. Moses is held to a higher standard because of his leadership. But also, I wonder, what would have happened if Moses had fully accepted his own responsibility for his actions? Because still here we see these shades of blaming the other Israelites for his own sin. That was odd. I got kicked out and my computer will not connect anymore, but luckily I was wrapping up anyway. So yes, Moses is talking about still being angry that he can't go into the promised land, but he's still blaming the other Israelites for that rather than accepting personal responsibility for his choice and saying, I'm so sorry, God, that I didn't do exactly as you instructed me. I was angry in the moment and I allowed my anger to influence my actions rather than trusting and relying on you. So I really wonder what would have happened differently if Moses had taken personal accountability, and maybe then he could have gone into the promised land, but he doesn't take personal accountability and he still is forbidden to enter into the land. So yeah, that's the end of chapter 3, and we are going to stop there for today, and we'll go into chapter 4 next week. But want to give you guys a chance to talk about what we've talked about and ask any questions you may have.